He made the whole world laugh. But behind the smile was a man constantly running, from poverty, from politics, from powerful enemies who wanted to silence him. Charlie Chaplin wasn't just a comedian. He was a mirror that society didn't always want to look into. And when he used his art to challenge the powerful, the laughter suddenly stopped. The world that adored him turned its back. This is the story of the silent rebel who spoke louder than words. Chapter 1. Born in the Shadows. Long before the fame, the wealth, and the iconic hat and cane, Charlie Chaplin's life began in one of the darkest corners of London. He was born in 1889 into a broken home, surrounded not by opportunity, but by the raw, biting reality of poverty. His parents were music hall performers, but their careers were already fading. His father, an alcoholic, his mother struggling with deteriorating mental health. For Charlie, childhood wasn't a warm memory. It was survival. He grew up in workhouses, slept in the streets at times, and ate when he could. For him, the world was harsh, unstable, unpredictable. But even in that harshness, he noticed something. People in pain still laughed. And that laughter, small, fragile but real, was a kind of escape. He watched street performers, clowns, drunks, and desperate people doing whatever they could to get a coin. He didn't just see the performances, he analyzed them. He studied human behavior without even realizing it. Every stumble, every awkward walk, every expressive face, he absorbed it. Not for entertainment, but as a language. Because Charlie didn't grow up learning stability. He grew up learning survival through performance. Chapter 2. Discovering the Stage. Charlie first stepped on stage as a child actor, not by choice, by necessity. He needed money, and performing was the only path he knew. But something unexpected happened. The stage didn't intimidate him, it nourished him. He realized he had a gift. He could turn pain into comedy. He could take the miseries of his childhood, the hunger, the instability, the chaos, and flip them into something that made people laugh. Audiences didn't just enjoy his performances, they connected with him even if they didn't know why. And the truth was simple. Chaplin performed the struggles he had lived. That authenticity, that rawness, made him magnetic. Soon he was touring with theater companies, traveling far beyond the world he grew up in. The boy who once slept in workhouses was suddenly performing for crowds who saw him as a rising star. But the most important transformation wasn't happening on stage. It was happening inside him. Charlie realized something powerful. Laughter wasn't just entertainment. It was influence. It was connection. It was truth disguised as humor. He didn't know it yet, but this understanding would later make him one of the most important and controversial artists of the 20th century. Chapter 3. America Calls. In 1910, Charlie Chaplin boarded a ship to America with a touring comedy troupe. At the time, Hollywood wasn't yet the global powerhouse it would become, but something big was brewing, the birth of cinema. And for Chaplin, this was destiny. Directors saw something unusual in him, his ability to express full emotions without saying a single word. Film was silent back then, meaning actors had to communicate everything with their bodies, their faces, their movement. Chaplin was made for this. Life had trained him for it. Soon, a film company hired him, and almost instantly he became a standout performer. But he wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to act. He wanted control. He wanted to create, to shape stories, to express ideas. And then it happened. The moment that changed entertainment forever. Chapter 4. The Birth of the Tramp. It started as a simple costume choice. A bowler hat, a tight coat, baggy pants, oversized shoes, and a small toothbrush mustache. On paper, nothing special. But on screen, it was magic. The Tramp wasn't just a character. He was the soul of the common man. Poor yet dignified, clumsy yet resilient, silly yet honest. Someone who kept moving forward, no matter how many times life tripped him. Audiences instantly fell in love. But what they didn't realize was that the Tramp wasn't fiction. He was Chaplin's childhood, wrapped in humor. Every wobbling walk, every hopeful smile, every moment of embarrassment was drawn from his own memories of poverty and hardship. Chaplin had found the perfect way to tell the truth without saying a word. and the world couldn't get enough. Overnight, he became the most famous performer on earth. He was earning more money than any actor had ever earned. Every studio wanted him. Every newspaper covered him. Every crowd cheered for him. But fame wasn't his goal. Influence was. Chapter 5. Silence with a Purpose. While most silent film comedians focused on pure slapstick, Chaplin did something different. He gave comedy a conscience. Behind the laughs, he added messages. Behind the visual gags, he added meaning. His films weren't just funny. They were about poverty, greed, inequality, and survival. Topics few dared to touch. He knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be powerless, to be ignored. So he used humor as a way to talk about uncomfortable truths, to show society a reflection of itself, and to speak for people who had no voice. But as Chaplin's art became more daring, more symbolic, and more political, powerful people began to take notice. Chapter 6. Love, Scandal, and the Public Eye. Chaplin's personal life was chaotic, messy, and often controversial. His relationships with young actresses became constant tabloid headlines. Studios worried about his image. Critics attacked him. Newspapers obsessed over every detail of his private life. But even with the scandals, his popularity kept growing. Because audiences understood something deeper. Chaplin wasn't pretending to be perfect. He was human. Flawed, emotional, impulsive, but honest. Still, the scandals made him vulnerable, and his enemies would eventually use them to bring him down. Chapter 7. The World Changes. The 1930s arrived. The Great Depression hit millions. Unemployment skyrocketed. People were hungry and desperate. And Chaplin, the man who always saw the world through the eyes of the poor, decided to respond the only way he knew, through art. In 1936, he released Modern Times, a film that mocked industrialization, mass production, and the way factories treated workers like machines. It was bold, it was funny, and it was political, too political for some. Critics accused him of being anti-capitalist, others labeled him a radical, but Chaplin didn't care. The world was suffering, and he wanted to say something meaningful, but that was just the beginning of his artistic rebellion. His next move would change everything, and turn some of his biggest supporters into enemies. Chapter 8. The Great Dictator. By the late 1930s, the world was spiraling toward war. Adolf Hitler had risen to power, spreading fear, violence, and hatred. Chaplin saw the danger long before many others did, and he decided to fight back, using film. In 1940, he released The Great Dictator, a satire mocking Hitler and exposing the cruelty of fascism. It was the first time Chaplin ever spoke in a film, and when he finally used his voice, it wasn't for comedy, it was for humanity. His final speech in the movie, a direct call for peace, freedom, and compassion, became one of the most powerful moments in film history. But not everyone applauded. Some accused him of interfering in politics. Some said he had no right to speak about global affairs. Some called him dangerous. More importantly, the FBI began watching him. Chapter 9. The Eyes of the Government. By the early 1940s, Charlie Chaplin wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a cultural force, a global icon, a man who could influence millions without saying a word. And that level of influence always attracts attention, especially from governments. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover saw Chaplin as a threat, not because of anything he had actually done, but because of what he believed in. He spoke openly about workers' rights. He supported humanitarian causes. He was against war. He wasn't afraid to criticize powerful leaders. To Hoover, that was enough. Chaplin had never joined any political party. He never called himself a communist or a socialist. But Hoover didn't care about facts. He cared about controlling narratives. So the surveillance began. Agents tracked his movements, collected his mail, listened to rumors, and kept detailed files on every part of his life. And when they realized they couldn't attack his art, they decided to attack the man. Chapter 10. A Target of the Red Scare. As World War II ended, America entered a new fear-driven era, the Red Scare. Scores of people, actors, writers, directors, were suddenly suspected of communist sympathies. The studios blacklisted many. Careers were destroyed overnight. Chaplin, with his outspoken social views, became an easy target. Newspapers began printing allegations with no proof. Politicians used his name to stir fear. Critics tried to frame him as un-American. It didn't matter that Chaplin paid taxes, employed hundreds, or created some of the most beloved films in history. It didn't matter that he repeatedly said he wasn't a communist. The narrative was set, and once a narrative is born, it's almost impossible to erase. But Chaplin refused to stay silent. He kept making films. He kept speaking through his art. And then came a moment that pushed his enemies over the edge. Chapter 11. A Man Who Spoke Too Loudly. In 1947, Chaplin was asked to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, the same committee that would go on to interrogate countless artists in Hollywood. They wanted him to explain his political beliefs, to justify his films, to defend his patriotism, to prove his innocence. But Chaplin didn't play along. He wasn't rude. He wasn't dramatic. He simply refused to let fear control him. He stated clearly that he was an artist, not a politician, and that his films spoke for themselves. And that moment, that calm defiance, was all his enemies needed. To them, this wasn't just a filmmaker. This was a public figure who was not afraid of them, a man who couldn't be intimidated, a man who used comedy to critique power, and for powerful people, that made him dangerous. Chapter 12. Scandal as a Weapon. When political attacks didn't work, the next strategy was character assassination. The government and the media began dragging his private life through the mud. His relationships, his divorces, his mistakes, his affairs. Every flaw, real or exaggerated, became a headline. And there was one case in particular, the Joan Barry scandal, that nearly destroyed him. Barry, a young actress, accused Chaplin of misconduct and claimed he was the father of her child. Blood tests proved he wasn't. Even the court recognized the evidence. But the law at the time didn't allow blood tests to determine paternity, so Chaplin was declared the legal father anyway. It didn't matter if the case was unfair. It didn't matter if the science disproved it. In the eyes of the public, he looked guilty, and the press tore him apart. Day after day, headline after headline. It wasn't justice, it was a smear campaign. Chaplin felt the pressure from every direction. His films were criticized before they were even released. Politicians condemned him publicly. The FBI tightened surveillance. The world that once adored him was now waiting for him to fall. Chapter 13. Limelight and the Ghost of Obscurity. In the early 1950s, Chaplin made one of his most personal films, Limelight. It was a story about a washed-up comedian who had once been famous, but now struggled to find purpose and acceptance. A man who felt forgotten by the world, a man trapped between his past success and the fear of disappearing. It was Chaplin's way of reflecting on his own fights, his own flaws, his own fears. But when the film was released in America, the backlash was immediate. Critics dismissed it. Politicians condemned it. Some theaters refused to show it. Not because the film was controversial, but because the man behind it was under fire. Chaplin wasn't just battling an image crisis. He was battling a political machine that had decided he didn't belong in America, and soon that machine would push him out entirely. Chapter 14. The Exile. In 1952, Chaplin boarded a ship to London with his family for a short trip. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. He expected to return to his home in America within weeks. But while he was still at sea, the US government made its move. The Attorney General issued an order. Charlie Chaplin would not be allowed back into the United States, not without undergoing intense questioning about his political beliefs and moral character. To Chaplin, it was a betrayal. He had lived in America for over 40 years. He had built his entire career there. He had shaped the film industry. He had brought joy to millions. And yet, with one decision, the country he helped entertain shut the door on him. Chaplin publicly stated he would never return, not to prove anything, but because he believed the decision was driven by fear, paranoia, and political hatred. He moved his family to Switzerland, settling in a quiet manor overlooking a peaceful lake. a world away from the chaos he left behind. But the exile wasn't just physical, it was emotional. For the first time in his life, Chaplin felt truly alone, not as a performer, not as a public figure, but as a person. And yet, even in that isolation, the rebel inside him wasn't finished. Chapter 15. A new era of creation. Living in Switzerland, Chaplin didn't retire quietly. He kept writing, kept creating, kept dreaming of stories he still wanted to tell. But he was older now. His style no longer matched the fast, modern world of Hollywood. His silent-style comedy seemed outdated to new audiences who had grown up with color, sound, and fast edits. Yet Chaplin refused to change who he was. He created A King in New York, a film directly satirizing American politics and the paranoia of the Red Scare. It wasn't subtle. It was bold, sharp, and unapologetic. And even though it wasn't a major box office hit, it was proof that Chaplin would never let fear silence him. Later he made A Countess from Hong Kong, a romantic comedy starring Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren. It wasn't a classic. Some critics even called it a disappointment. But Chaplin was no longer chasing success. He was chasing expression. He was creating because it was who he was, not because he needed applause. He had spent his entire life surviving through art. He wasn't going to stop now. Chapter 16. The World Remembers. As the years passed, something unexpected happened. The anger faded. The political climate changed. The people who had attacked him grew old or disappeared from public life. And slowly the world began to look at Chaplin not as a threat, but as a legend. Film scholars studied his techniques. Directors praised his genius, audiences rediscovered his classics, and a new generation realized something simple. Chaplin wasn't dangerous. He was visionary. His films weren't propaganda. They were empathy wrapped in comedy. And the world finally understood that the man they once tried to silence was one of the most important storytellers of all time. Chapter 17. An Unexpected Homecoming. By the early 1970s, Chaplin was well into his 80s. He had lived more than one lifetime. A childhood of poverty, a rise to global stardom, political battles, scandals, blacklisting, and exile. But time has a way of softening old conflicts, and the world had changed. Younger generations weren't interested in old grudges. They wanted to understand the pioneers who had shaped the art they now loved. Suddenly, Chaplin's films were being restored, studied, and celebrated. His influence was being acknowledged by filmmakers, historians, and critics who recognized his genius beyond the controversies. And then something unimaginable happened. Hollywood, the same place that had once turned its back on him, reached out with an invitation. They wanted to give him an Academy Award for Lifetime Achievement, to honor his courage, his innovation, his contributions to filmmaking, his impact on global culture. Chaplin accepted, and in 1972, after 20 years of exile, Charlie Chaplin returned to the United States. When Chaplin stepped onto the stage at the Oscars, the entire audience rose to their feet. They didn't just clap. They celebrated him with a standing ovation that went on for 12 full minutes, one of the longest in Academy Awards history. It wasn't just applause, it was an apology, a recognition of everything he had given the world. A moment of healing between an artist and the country that had once rejected him. Chaplin, overwhelmed, could barely speak. He had spent decades wondering whether people had forgotten him, and now thousands were reminding him how much he mattered. In that moment, he wasn't the exiled filmmaker. He wasn't the target of political warfare. He wasn't the scandalous figure the tabloids had loved to attack. He was simply Charlie Chaplin, a man who had made the world laugh, cry, think, and feel. And the world finally acknowledged the truth. He had never needed dialogue to speak. His art had always done the talking. Chapter 19. A Legacy in Reflection. As Chaplin entered the final years of his life, he spent more time in quiet reflection. He lived in a peaceful estate in Switzerland, with his wife Una and their children, surrounded by nature and calm. The chaos of Hollywood was far behind him. The political storms had passed. The struggles of his youth were memories he had learned to accept. And now he was no longer fighting for a place in the world. He had already earned it. Everywhere he looked, he saw echoes of his influence, in slapstick comedies, in heartfelt dramas, in films that blended humor with social messaging, in characters who used physicality instead of words to create emotion. He saw comedians walking the path he had paved, directors borrowing the techniques he had invented, audiences laughing at scenes he had created half a century earlier. Very few artists had shaped cinema as profoundly as he did, and even fewer had done it without sound. Chaplin often said that his goal was simple: to make people feel something real, to remind them of the beauty and pain of being human, and through his work, he had done exactly that. Chapter 20. The Final Years. In his 80s, Chaplin's health began to decline. He moved slowly, spoke softly, and spent most days surrounded by his family. But even then, his mind remained active. He continued writing. He continued imagining stories. He continued dreaming of films he never had the chance to make. He didn't fear aging. He had lived through enough storms to understand that time was simply another chapter, and in a way, the silence of his later years felt fitting. After a lifetime of expressing so much without words, he now lived exactly as he had performed, quietly, thoughtfully, and observantly. On December 25, 1977, Charlie Chaplin passed away in his sleep at the age of 88. Peacefully, softly, without drama. He left behind a legacy so large that even today, nearly a century after his biggest films, audiences still recognize the small mustache, the bowler hat, and the funny little walk. It's not just a character, it's a symbol, a reminder of a man who reshaped comedy, challenged power, and gave humanity a voice through silence. Chapter 21. His Art in a Modern World. If Chaplin were alive today, he might be stunned by how much the world has changed. And yet, how much it hasn't. Technology evolved. Cinema became louder, faster, more complex. Sound, color, CGI, sprawling franchises. The modern era is full of spectacle. And yet, Chaplin's films continue to resonate, not because of nostalgia, not because of history, but because he understood people. He understood loneliness. He understood resilience. He understood hope. He understood how humor and heartbreak often walk the same path. In a world filled with chaos, Chaplin's art reminds us that the simplest gestures can speak the loudest. A glance, a stumble, a hopeful smile. Every generation rediscovers him. Every generation finds meaning in his work. That's why Chaplin's films are still shown in classrooms, museums, festivals, and streaming platforms. He didn't just create movies. He created universal human stories. Chapter 35. The Final Message. Charlie Chaplin didn't leave behind one legacy. He left behind many. Chapter 22. The Power of Silence. One of Chaplin's greatest strengths was understanding something most filmmakers overlooked. Silence is powerful. In a world full of noise, silence forces you to focus on emotion, on movement, on subtlety, on the truth hidden between the lines. Chaplin mastered this. He turned silence into a language. Every tilt of his head carried meaning. Every stumble had intention. Every smile held a quiet kind of vulnerability that words could never replicate. And even after sound films took over the industry, Chaplin continued to defend the purity of silent storytelling. He believed that words, if used carelessly, weakened a message rather than strengthening it. Ironically, his greatest speech, the monologue in The Great Dictator, is remembered not because it was loud, but because it came from someone who rarely spoke. When a person who lives in silence finally raises their voice, the world listens. Chapter 23. The Rebellion in His Art. Chaplin's rebellion wasn't loud or violent. He didn't lead protests or write manifestos. His rebellion was gentle but firm, sharp but humorous, subtle but deeply impactful. He used comedy as a way to speak truth. He used drama as a way to express vulnerability. He used silence as a way to challenge injustice. In modern times, he exposed the dehumanization of factory labor. In The Great Dictator, he confronted fascism when most people were too afraid to. In The Kid, he showed the pain and beauty of unconventional families. In City Lights, He proved that love can be felt without a single word being spoken. Chaplin understood that art is not just entertainment, it's a mirror. And sometimes people don't like what they see in that mirror. That's why he was attacked. That's why he was feared. That's why he was forced into exile. But even then, his films remained. His voice, the one he crafted through body language, timing, and emotion, continued speaking louder than any speech ever could. The world eventually realized the truth. He wasn't a threat. He was a reminder of its conscience. Chapter 24. The man behind the legend. Behind the fame, the controversies, and the iconic character was a human being shaped by hardship, a boy who grew up hungry, a teenager who fought for survival, a young man who discovered that comedy could save him, a star who learned the cost of influence, a creator who refused to be silenced, an old man who found peace in family and solitude. Chaplin wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, he hurt people, he clashed with others, he struggled with his own ego like many great artists do, but he never stopped caring about the world. He never stopped trying to say something meaningful. He never stopped believing that art could make people more compassionate. And in a way, The Tramp, his most famous creation, was his spiritual reflection, a survivor, a dreamer, a wanderer searching for dignity, a symbol of innocence walking through a world that wasn't always kind. Chaplin didn't just play the tramp, he lived it. Chapter 25. Redefining cinema. Chaplin didn't just participate in the birth of cinema, he helped create the language that filmmakers still use today. Long before schools taught film theory, Chaplin was shaping the art form by instinct. He experimented with pacing, tension, rhythm, and emotional timing. He understood that comedy wasn't just about jokes, it was about anticipation, surprise, and structure. He became a master of visual storytelling. A simple gesture in his films could reveal what pages of dialogue might say today. He could make an audience laugh with a pause, cry with a glance, or feel hope with the lift of a smile. Every filmmaker who relies on physicality, timing, or visual metaphors owes something to Chaplin. Every genre that blends humor and heartbreak echoes his influence. Every movie that tries to say something deeper beneath its entertainment stands on the foundation he helped build. Chaplin didn't follow the rules of cinema. He wrote them. Chapter 26. The first global movie star. Before Chaplin, movies were local. Different countries had their own stars, their own styles, their own audiences. But Chaplin was universal. His work didn't rely on language. It bypassed cultural barriers. Anyone, from London to Tokyo, from New York to Cairo, could understand him. His walk, his hat, his cane, his expressive eyes. People recognized him instantly, even without hearing a sound. He was the first truly global celebrity in history. The first person whose face was known across continents. During the era of silent film, cinema became a new shared language, and Chaplin became its most recognizable symbol. People saw the tramp as one of their own, a fellow struggler, a survivor of hardship, a wanderer in search of kindness. For immigrants, he represented hope. For the poor, he represented perseverance. For outsiders, he represented belonging. Chaplin wasn't rich when he created The Tramp, but The Tramp made everyone feel rich in spirit. Chapter 27. The man who saved his mother. Behind Chaplin's rise to fame lies a quieter story, one that shaped the emotional core of all his films. His mother, Hannah Chaplin, had once been a performer herself, a singer on the music hall stages, a woman full of hope. But illness and hardship overwhelmed her. She spent years in poverty, years in mental institutions, years struggling to survive. As a child, Chaplin watched his mother suffer, and he carried that pain forever. When he finally found success, the very first thing he did was bring her into his home. He gave her care. He gave her stability. He protected her from the world that had once broken her. He couldn't heal everything she had gone through, but he made sure she spent her final years in comfort and peace. That trauma, that love, shaped his art. It's why so many of his films have themes of compassion, why he portrayed poverty with honesty instead of mockery, why he portrayed children with tenderness, why he fought so hard to defend people who were powerless. Chaplin never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped honoring the woman who taught him empathy. Charlie Chaplin didn't leave behind one legacy. He left behind many. A legacy of innovation, a legacy of courage, a legacy of empathy wrapped in humor, a legacy of art that transcends time, culture, and language. He started as a boy who had nothing. He became a man who gave everything, and he ended as a legend who continues giving long after his final breath. Chaplin proved that even when the world tries to silence you, your message can still echo through generations. And he proved one timeless truth: you don't need a voice to be heard, you just need something worth saying.